Hello students, in today's session we are going to see the second part of Unit 6. The Unit 6 is totally based on web services, and in the previous session we have gone through the idea of web services and how it is used in today's technological world. So in today's session we are going to see the second part, that is EJB, that means Enterprise Java Beans. Under that we are going to see its overview, types, benefits, architecture, how the EJB technology actually works, and JNDI lookup. So before moving to types, we will first see the overview. EJB stands for Enterprise Java Beans. So it is a server-side component which runs on application server, or we call container developed for the purpose of distributed and enterprise level application. So this container will provide support for system level services like transaction management, security, which makes the developer task easy and he can focus on the business logic. So mainly it was designed as a server side component so that it will run the application server and was able to develop the purpose of distributed and enterprise level application. So it is an essential part of J2W platform, and it provides an architecture to develop and deploy the component based enterprise application. It will consider the robustness, plus it is having high scalability and high performance. So this comes under the features of that EJB components. So enterprise Java Beans are used for developing scalable, distributed, server-side components and typically encapsulate the business logic of the application. So, and the web repository yields a runtime domain for web-related software elements that include the server-side software element and summarize business logic of an application. So it also contains the reliability of computer, plus JSL, that is Java Servlet Lifecycle Management, and transaction procedure, plus other web services. So this EJB enumeration becomes a subset of Java enumeration. Again, if you are going through the advantages or benefits of Enterprise Java Beans, it provides developers architecture independence, as it insulates developers from the underlying middleware, and only environment an EJB developer sees is the Java environment. So it helps the EJB server or the container vendor to change and make improvements on the underlying middleware layer without affecting users' existing enterprise architecture. So if you want to make any changes to the application in the Java environment, and you just don't want to change the background environment or the middleware environment that is provided by the vendor, at that time you can use proficiently this EJB container. Plus this VORA for server side components. So this is another feature of EJB. This VORA is nothing but write once, run anywhere system. Okay. So since EJB is based on Java technology, both the developer and the user are guaranteed that the components are write once and run anywhere. So as long as the EJB server faithfully conforms to the EJB specification, any EJB application should run within that server only. So this is the added feature. Plus EJB establishes the roles for application development. It also assigns specific roles for project participants that are charged with enterprise application development, and they utilize the EJB. Then the server vendor can take care of providing support for complex system services, and make available for any organized framework for a bean to execute in, and without assistance from bean developers. And it also provides distributed transaction support for the developers. Then EJB also provides the deployment of EJB application that is implemented on any application server which is compatible with the standard specifications of J2EE. Then it will also help to create portable and scalable solutions. So these are few additional advantages plus features of EJB applications. Okay, so first was it provides developers architecture independence. It is Vora technology. Plus third, it establishes roles for application development, and fourth, it provides distributed transaction support. Okay, so focusing on these, it also gives you the vendor specific enhancement. So since the EJB specifications provides a lot of flexibility for vendors to create their own enhancements, the EJB environment may end being feature rich. Okay, so it becomes rich in feature providence. Okay, as it is providing vendor enhancement for their application development. So when to use this enterprise Java bean, that we'll see. The first point can be the application needs remote access. In other words, the EJB is distributed. Whenever the application wants to be executed on the remote access or with the remote access, at that time this enterprise Java bean can be used widely. Plus, when the application needs to be scalable, EJB application supports load balancing, clustering, and failover. So this is the much needed software. Then when the application needs encapsulated business logic, at that time also EJB application is used because it is separated from presentation and persistent layer. So this is about the overview of EJB. Now, based upon these features, there are some types of EJB that we are going to see. The figure shows the types undertaken by EJB components, that are session beans, message beans, and entity beans. In that, session beans are again having two types as stateless and stateful, and entity beans are again divided as bean managed persistent and container managed persistent. So we'll see one by one these types. What are the session beans? Okay, any EJB container hold two types of beans, that are session beans and in that stateless and stateful beans. Okay. So first is the session beans that stores data of any particular user for single session. So main difference between these three we are going to see as a point. Okay. So session beans that can either be stateful or stateless or singleton, and they can be accessed via either a local like your JVM or remote different JVM. So interface or directly without an interface. Okay. So all the session beans support asynchronous execution for all the views. So what the session beans actually are made of? The session beans are non-persistent enterprise beans, and they also encapsulate business logic. So it can be invoked by local, remote, and web service client. Yes, it can be used for calculations, then database access. Mhm. And the life cycle of session bin is maintained by application server, that is EJB container. For example, whenever a client wants to perform any of these actions, such as making a reservation or validating any credit card, so a session bin can be used in that case. So the session bin decides what data is to be modified, and typically the session bin uses an entity bin to access or modify the data. And how they are working, they implement the business logic. We are typically talking about session bins only now. So they implement business logic, business rules, algorithms, and workflows. So session bins are relatively short-lived components. They are singleton and store data of particular user for single session only. So typically they become short-lived components, and the EJB container may destroy the session bin if its client times out. Okay, so this is the most important point, as it is short-lived component, and if the client is away from the session for a particular time period that might be a long, then it can be destroyed by container. So there are three kinds of session bins actually, but mostly two of them are considered. So first is stateful, second is stateless, and third it is instantiated actually. It is the singleton session bin. So the session bins is less resources intensive as compared to the entity bin, and session bin gets destroyed as soon as the user session terminates. So it is only covered for one single use. Then what the stateful session bin or stateless session bin is. So stateless session bin is a business object that represents business logic only. It doesn't have any state or any data. State here represent the meaning data. In other words, we can see any conversational state between multiple method calls is not maintained by the container. And in case of stateless session bin, if there are multiple methods and the conversation is being carried out between those method calls, then it is not maintained by this stateless session bin, because it is not holding any data. Okay, it is purely focusing on business logic, and it doesn't store the state or data of that particular method. So the stateless bin objects are pulled by the EJB container to service the request on demand. It can be accessed by one client at a time, and in case of concurrent access, EJB container routes each request to different instance. And annotations used in stateless session bin are at stateless. So any stateless session bin can be normally create a pool of few stateless bins objects and use these objects to process client's request. So because of pool, what happens, the instance variable values are not guaranteed to be same across the lookups or any methods that are called. Okay, so example of stateless session bin can be the sum service, which return the sum of any two numbers. So when for example, if there are two numbers, we have taken or assigned to the variable c and b, so and stored addition of these two numbers into the variable. As soon as the addition is made and stored in the third variable. The previous or the numbers are can be divided or differentiated from the logic. Okay, so what of the role of that two numbers was to add and store at some place. So after that their work is done, so that they can be differentiated from the main logic. So this is the simplest example of any stateless session bin. Then stateful session bin. So stateful session bin is a business object that represents business logic like stateless session bin, but it maintains the session or the state data. In other words, the conversational state between multiple method calls is maintained by the container in stateful session bin. So it is exactly working oppositely as your stateless session bin. So in your university exam, actually this question was also asked in December 18th question paper for 6 marks, like what are the different types of EJB, and identify and explain the situations about when to use the session bins. So purely it was based on session bins. So in that, whenever this question is asked, you have to firstly define the session bins with uses or advantages plus features. In short also you can define those, because the question mainly focusing on types. Yeah. Then and after that, these two main types of session bins, that are stateful and stateless session bins, plus the instantiated type is singleton. So in stateful session bins we can see the annotation used is at stateful. Okay, the stateful session bin maintains client specific session, and whatever the information related with client session is there, that is across the several transactions, and this is stored with the stateful session bins, and it exists for the duration of single client or server session. Thus the stateful session bins has the extra overhead for server to maintain the state than the stateless session bins. Okay, so we have seen the stateless session bin, in that it is not storing any type of data, so it is not having any overhead or any type of memory allotment for any data. Okay, because it is not holding any type of data, it is just focusing on the business logic. So the in case of stateful session bin, it is focusing on business logic, plus it is holding the state of particular session. Okay, so it is having the extra overhead to the server, because it is maintaining the state that of the application. For example, consider a customer is using a debit card. Okay, that debit card is being used as an ATM machine. So the ATM could perform various operations like the ATM can do the checking account balance, it can transfer the funds, or it can make a withdrawal. Okay, so any of these can be performed. So these operations could be performed one by one by the same customer, right? So the bin needs to keep track its state for each of these operations to the same client. Getting? So different operations are getting performed by same client on the same thing. So this is the example of stateful session bin. So as these operations are being carried out by the same customer, okay, in different ways, but for the same debit card, right? So there is necessity of keeping track of these operations for that particular customer by the session. So this becomes the stateful session bin. Okay, So this is the best example that can be given in the stateful session bin. Then the third session bin is actually just instantiated once per application and exists for the life cycle of application. That is nothing but the singleton. Okay, and this singleton session bins are designed for circumstances in which state must be shared across all the clients. Plus, it is similar to stateless bins, and developers must ensure that singleton thread safety. Okay. So this is about the session bins that are used in as EJB components. Then second type of EJB is message driven bin, meaning MDB as shortly it is called, that contains business logic but it is invoked by passing the message. Okay, in session bins we have seen all three types of session bins also, but it is not passing any message to the client or to the server. So message driven bins are made for that particular work. Okay. So message driven bins are business objects whose execution is triggered by messages instead of method calls. So MDB is used to provide a high level ease of use abstraction for the lower level Java message services. Okay. And it may subscribe to JMS message queues or message topics, which are typically happens via the annotations. And the message driven bins were added in EJB to allow event driven processing. So as talking about the difference between session bin and message bin, you have to focus on the things that unlike session bins, the MDB does not have any client view like local, remote or no interface view. That is, the client cannot look up an MDB instance. An MDB just listens for any incoming message on, for example, a JMS queue or a topic and process them automatically. Okay. So as example we can see as sending a configuration update to multiple nodes might be done by sending a JMS message to a message topic, and it could be handled by a message driven bin. Okay, so what task it is performing here is just sending out the configuration update message to multiple nodes. Okay, it is not listening the paradigm of the reply. Right? It is just sending out the messages and it is doing its work. So submitting a job to a work cluster might be done by sending a JMS message to message queue, and it could also be handled by a MDB, but this time listening to a queue, that is the message paradigm, and the queue is used here. And since the sender doesn't have to care which worker executes the job, but it does need assurance that the job is only executed once. So when there is work, like if whoever is the client or the sender of a particular message, he just wants the work to be done, not the work is done by which party or which user. Okay, so at that time what he will do, he will use just the message driven bin and pass that particular message to all the nodes or all the clients that are under his maintenance. Okay. So he will just focus on whether the job is executed once or not. Okay, so this is about message driven bin. Then the MDB synchronously receives a message and processes it. Okay, so here you can see in the diagram, the application client is there. He will send the message via queue and the message delivered to the container. So there the MDB instance is created. Okay, so this is the message driven bin. Then third type is entity bins. uh, the entity beans are having three types again. Okay. So the entity beans, in that the container managed persistent and bean managed persistent is used there. The entity beans contain persistent data and it can be saved in the data source. Okay. So there are basically two types, container managed and bean managed persistence. Okay. So the container managed persistent assign their persistence to the EJB container. Okay. The EJB container manages data by saving it to a designated resource, which is normally a database. For this to occur, you must define the data that the container is to manage within the deployment descriptors, and the container manages the data by saving it to the database. Okay. Just thing to remember about container managed persistent is it will assign their persistence to the EJB container. That's it. And then the bean managed persistent, that is the second type of entity bean, is the bean implementation manages that data within callback methods. So all the logic for storing data to your persistent storage must be included in EJB store, and it should be reloaded from your storage in the EJB load method. So this container invokes these methods when necessary. Any entity bean can implement either a bean managed or container managed persistent. In the case of bean managed persistent, the implementer of an entity bean stores and retrieves the information managed by the bean through direct database calls. And in case of container managed persistent, the container provider may implement access to the database using standard APIs. So it can offer the tools to map instance variables, okay, to map the instance variables of any entity bean to calls to an underlying database, and this approach makes it easier to use entity beans with different database. So this is about the entity beans that are managed with containing persistent data, and it can be saved in the data source. So next we are going to see the benefits. What are the benefits of EJB? So EJB, in there are number of benefits, so we can see it is large scale and complex enterprise level application development is simplified. So simplified development of any large scale enterprise level application is done with the EJB, plus application server or EJB container provides most of the system level services like transaction handling, logging, load balancing, persistent mechanism, and exception handling, and so on. So there are so many applications that are related with day-to-day work, that are with the programming languages or with the containers or with the messages or with the beans. So all these can be provided with the EJB container. Okay, so it is focusing on transaction handling, logging, load balancing, okay, and exception handling as well. So it becomes a very important task in your programming field. Then EJB developer just focus on the business logic and on solving business problems. So other things need not to be worried while using EJB containers or EJB, because business logic lies in EJB. So front-end developer can focus on the presentation of client interface. This is the basic feature of EJB. Then the client developer does not have to code the routines that implement the business rules or access any database. As a result, client side has less codes which is particularly important for clients that run on small devices. The Java beans are portable components which enable the Java application assembler to build new applications from existing Java beans. Okay, so the EJB are portable in nature, and the new applications can be created from existing beans by the application assembler. Plus, there is no need for the client developer to write code for routines which implement the rules regarding business or database access. And therefore, the size of client application becomes small, which is useful for speeding up any small devices. And the life cycle of EJB instance is controlled by EJB container effectively. So these are important benefits of EJB, and the benefits related question can be asked in exam for the 4 marks. Okay, so at that time you have to mention at least 6 to 7 uses or benefits of EJB. Okay, that will be beneficial for your good marks. Okay, then the next part related to EJB is architecture. So we have talked about what is EJB. We have also seen the types of EJB based upon its workflow. Okay, whether it is a session, in session also, whether it is a stateful or stateless Java bean, or message driven bean it is, or the entity bean it is. Okay, so we have gone with all through these types and benefits as well. So next point is the architecture of EJB. So the EJB architecture is made up of client application, and with that it is having addition of an application server, an EJB container in which different types of beans lie. Okay, the EJB container. Yes. So this question is asked for 6 or 8 marks. In May 19 also this question was asked for 8 marks. That was draw and explain each tier of 3 tiers architecture using EJB. So from question you can have an idea as it is the tiered architecture. Okay, it can also be used asked as EJB architecture with all its components. So the EJB architecture is used to create a server-side, multi-user, secure, scalable, transactional and enterprise-level applications. Okay, I'll repeat the things. It is used to create server-side, multiple-user, secure, scalable, transactional and enterprise-level applications. It focuses and supports the client server or completely distributed entire applications. So the paradigm of architecture is to build the application from existing components which are specifically customized for some special environment. And the EJB architecture helps to provide a general purpose infrastructure, so the developer need not worry about writing code for handling the transactional behavior, plus security of the application and management of resources at the system level. Developer can just focus on the business logic, and this is the main content of EJB. Okay. Then the EJB specification specifies the contract between objects of EJB architecture. The beans which implement the business logic becomes platform independent, and they can be shifted to any other more scalable platform if necessary, and without need of any modifications, because they are following the Vora logic, that is write once and run anywhere. So in architecture we can see there is EJB client and a relational database. So the you can say it can be a client tile, middle tier, and backend tier. So the client tile is having the client EJB client plus the EJB server is this middle part is known as middle tier. Okay, that is the EJB server, which is containing EJB clients and who are made up of enterprise Java beans combination. Okay, multiple enterprise Java beans. Then the third tier or the backend tier is relational database. It can be made up of enterprise information system plus relational database, legacy applications, and ERP systems. So all things like client tier, middle tier, and backend tier, they become a three-tier architecture for EJB. Okay. So we'll see one by one these components. First is EJB server, EJB container, enterprise beans, and EJB clients. Plus the other auxiliary systems like Java naming and directory interface, that is JNDI, that we are going to see in detail after this session, and Java transaction services, etc. So what EJB server is? It is the outmost container of the architecture. Okay, the main functionality of EJB server is to provide execution environment for EJB containers. Okay, now as in diagram you can see the EJB server is at the outer layer and it is holding EJB clients, and EJB client is focusing on EJBs. Okay, so there are multiple enterprise Java beans and EJB client is holding those Java beans. Plus this EJB client is under watch of EJB server. So the main functionality of this EJB server becomes it provides the execution environment for EJB container. Plus the EJB server provides system services such as load balancing, device accessing, and multiprocessing for EJB containers. Then the system resources are managed effectively by EJB server for the container, and these resources include network connections, memory, pools, processes, database connections, etc. This EJB server handles parallel access to the bin. For this purpose, usually serialization of bin method access is used. So this EJB server acts as a transaction processing monitor to provide transaction services, and the EJB server provides implementation of JNDI, that is Java naming and directory interface. Plus it is also executable for other services like security. Okay, so focused main things of this EJB server are: it is outmost container, it manage EJB container, it provides runtime environment, and provide the services like process, the thread management, system resource management, plus database connection, pooling, and caching. So these are the things related to EJB server. The second part of EJB architecture is EJB container. So it contains enterprise beans. We have seen in diagram as it is having multiple enterprise Java beans. Okay, so main thing of this container is it is holding multiple Java beans or enterprise Java beans. The EJB container is an interface in between EJB and low-level platform-specific functionality which supports the bean and the EJB server. So why there is need of this container, that we will specify. A bean cannot be accessed directly by the EJB. This is done with the help of container generated class which can call the beans method. Okay, the thing to remember here is any Java bean or any bean cannot be accessed directly with the EJB. This should be done with the help of container generated class which can call the beans method. So thing while executing the program need to remember is that there should be a container class present so that the methods of beans can be called, and with the help of beans methods the container can provide system level services to beans such as control of parallel access, transaction, security, etc. Right? Then the server resources like memory, thread are utilized by the container by managing the life cycle of beans. This container uses standard interfaces that are defined in the EJB specification to make the required services available to beans. For example, the transaction service. Plus, the container manages the persistence, transactional properties, and security of EJB by interacting with classes that are created by deployment tools. So these are focus point of EJB container, that it contains enterprise beans, it provides services, naming, lifestyle management, persistence, transaction management, and security. Then the Java beans. So the enterprise Java beans, okay, it is a again component of EJB architecture. Okay, we have seen the EJB server is holding EJB client and that clients are holding Java beans. So Java beans again we have seen with the types like they are holding three types like session beans, message beans, and entity beans. Okay, so the main working of this enterprise Java beans, okay, become it provides the home interface plus the remote interface. Then it also provides the EJB class and deployment descriptor. Okay, so the home interface will help the client to create, remove, and find existing bean instances. Plus, the remote interface will help to expose the business logic of bean for the client, and EJB class is actually implementation of business logic that is provided by EJB class. So this class will implement all the methods which are declared in remote interface and the creation of finder methods of home interface. Plus the fourth point about enterprise Java beans become the deployment descriptor. So the work of deployment descriptor is it specifies the configurable properties of bean and also specifies the transactional, security, and persistent state management policy of bean. So the part of this enterprise Java bean, next is the execution part, okay, and the EJB clients. So EJB clients are actually the enterprise Java beans only. So it interacts with the EJB container. The EJB client is a local program which can call and operate the remote beans. Plus, the client locates an enterprise Java bean through JNDI in the EJB clients. So this was about the things that are contained as components of EJB architecture. That focuses on three parts, that is client tier, middle tier, and backend tier. Okay, so it becomes a three-tier architecture for EJB. So when the question is asked to define the three-tier architecture of EJB, then you have to first describe it as the definition of EJB plus the architecture of the components that are taken as tier or as one by one role. Okay. So this is about the architecture. Then EJB technology is the next part. The enterprise Java Beans technology is the server-side component architecture for Java platform and enterprise edition, that is Java EE. Okay. The EJB technology enables rapid and simplified development of any distributed, transactional, secure and portable applications that are based on the Java technology. Then the technology again contains with the things that are included in the architecture itself. Okay, so this technology is basically focusing on the rapid or transactional applications. Okay, and as we have seen, the EJB technology or enterprise Java Beans are focusing on Java. So Java related applications are mainly used in EJB technology. So the faster transaction can be done and secured with the technology. So EJB containers must support both the container managed asset transactions and B managed transactions. So the container managed transactions are there that are by default active for calls of session beans, and that are not explicit configuration is needed for them. So this behavior may be declaratively tuned by the bean via annotations. So next part is JNDI lookup that will continue with the next session.